Hey there, everybody. This is Mrs. Jones with the second in my series in From Research to Practice about close reading. And at the first video, I will put a link in the description, which is set up, choosing your text, where to find text, how long the text should be. So I'm not going to go into any of that. You can watch that one. This is on day 1 of close reading. So we're going to start with the preparation. So for this particular close read, I have chosen this poem by A.A. Milne. Yes, he's the guy who wrote Winnie the Pooh, Bad Sir Brian Botany. And you'll know from my last video, I didn't really talk too much about poetry, but narrative poetry is a great way to get a really great text that has lots of good figurative language that's short. Now you notice this one is longer than is typical. We normally like to see 1 page, but it's very much spread out. There's very little written on a page. And I wanted to keep the formatting and keep some of the cute little pictures to help students with their inference. And I also like the fact that there's lots of white space for them to do their writing. And a really key component to close reading is that you do make each student their own copy, and make yourself one too, that you're going to project on your document camera so that you can model for your students. The next thing I want to do is I want to divide the text into 3 parts. That goes with our gradual release of responsibility model. So I want a you do, you meaning the teacher, I want a we do, and I want a you do for the students. And generally what I do is I divide the text in 2/4 and then a half. So the first fourth of the text is an I do by the teacher. The second fourth is we do as a class, and the last half of the text is independent or in partners. That does vary though. It really depends on where are some natural breaks in the text. And if the text, particularly if the text is nonfiction, I have a tendency to do more like a third, because I know that nonfiction texts are much more challenging for my 4th graders. But this text really naturally lends itself to a fourth, and a half. So that's how I've decided. And I've just put little brackets in my text because I'm going to be writing right along with the students. So I don't do much ahead of time. But if this is something that's a little more challenging to you, I would actually make another copy of this that the kids don't see that you are looking at. So we start with, of course, reading our text. And we have lots of options there. And I do tend to try to mix it up, again, depending on the text. Generally, though, I like to read it first with Dyad Reading. And I've got a whole nother video on Dyad Reading, which is going to be in the description. I'm not going to go over it here. But you could also do round robin reading. You could read it to them. You could choral read it. However you want to read the text. It's nice and short. It won't take you very long. Since I'm having the students read it in dyad partners, or what we call in my school duet partners, we call it that because we're a music magnet, and so everything has a musical connotation. I have them then come back, and on their own, they circle 3 to 5 words per paragraph, or in this case, I probably do per stanza, that they think are interesting, that they think a younger child might not know, that they don't know. I don't really give them an option of doing anything less than 3 to 5 words. People have asked me that before. What if they can't come up with 3 to 5 words? You come up with 3 to 5 words that they circle, and they underline sections that they have a question about, and they already start annotating and writing their questions in the margins. And as they come back from dyad reading, and once they're all in their seats, then I will model the process of looking for words, circling them, underlining parts that I'm confused about, and writing my questions in the margins. And so I'll do an I do with that here. We'll do a we do here. We'll share our questions with each other. Students are encouraged but not required to write other people's questions down. And then last but not least, I want to make sure that on the back they've done that themselves. And then they pass in this paper. And what I do is I look at the questions that they have written. And I just want to basically see their basic level of engagement. I also want to look at the types of questions they're answering. And basically what I find that there's 4 types of questions that students are going to ask. First of all, they are not going to have questions. Some students don't, which is not acceptable. But if they don't, I need to know right away and do something about it, because these curiosity questions are going to really lead us through our entire week. And if they don't have any, then I need to help them with that process. I also pay attention if their questions are too general. I had a question one student asked, this is at the very beginning of the process of doing close reading, what's a plant? Well, I know he knows what a plant is. So, he's just writing something down because I told him to. Also, if I'm noticing that they're writing the same question as their neighbor, I'll red flag that. And of course, any students that are absent that day who don't get a chance to interact with the text in this way. The other thing I'm looking for is if they do ask some meaningful questions, are they asking questions that are directly answered in the text? And that is something that I want to be aware of. And it usually shows that a student has very little understanding or a very, very superficial understanding of the text. And that's something that I just want to know about on my first day. The third group I want to look at is students who have a question that can be answered if you infer from the text. So for example, in this particular poem, I've done this before. A lot of students have a question about this sentence right here. So Brian went on a journey and he found a lot of duckweed. They pulled him out and dried him and they blipped him on the head. Well, you can use the text to find out that going on a journey means they threw him in the water and then they pulled him out. So using the picture, using this part and this part together, students should be able to infer an answer. If you are familiar with QAR, that would be either an author and me or a think and search. Those students usually have a good understanding of the text, but they're just having trouble with inference. And then last but not least, I look for students who have questions that are not answered in the text, that are outside the text. Those usually indicate they have really good initial comprehension and they have really great curiosity questions, and I want to encourage those. And all I do is I take a regular old piece of lined paper. I know this isn't fancy at all, no fancy forms or anything. And I just divide my piece of paper into 4 different sections. And you can see we've got the 2 general, non-original, or no questions at all. These are the 5 students that happened to, and then these are my students that were absent, and I know that they struggle with doing this, so I've put them in this group. These are questions answered directly in the text. These are questions with an inference. And you notice I put one absent student here because I know him pretty well and I think he would probably land in here. And then I have my students with questions outside the text. And this is going to guide me for the future. This is not something that you would grade. You're not going to grade them on their questions. It's just for future reference. Because if their questions are non-existent or poor to begin with, it's going to be difficult for them to keep engaged in close reading for the rest of the week. So that's what day 1 looks like interacting with our text for close reading. I'll put a link in the description as I upload more videos about day 3 and 4. Thanks for tuning in, TTFN. Ta-ta for now.